All right, everyone, welcome in. Just making sure that I'm live before we get started in our video today. Okay. I don't know what everyone else, but I'm excited for here in the United States. The 4th of July holiday is coming up. So I will not be having a live next Friday, but I'm very excited to be presenting this topic today. All right, let's see here. One second. Just making sure this shows up. Okay. We're here in Denver, Colorado, and the weather is so nice. It's so warm. And yeah, we are in full swing. Okay, I am live. Let's double check that. Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone, and welcome in. Well, welcome. I'm Josie Warren, the autoimmune expert, and today I have a very important and critical topic when it comes to autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses. And before we dive right in, for those who are new to my channel or new to getting to know me, I want you to know that I understand chronic illness and autoimmune disease. For my teens and through my 20s, so for about 14 plus years, I had 8 autoimmune diseases, things like Hashimoto's, MS, CVID, rheumatoid arthritis, and I also struggled with chronic illnesses like ADD, depression, anxiety, and an eating disorder. I was also a psychotherapist, and this is going to be the topic of today. This all kicked off when I was 15 and I lost my dad. 6 months later, I developed rheumatoid arthritis, and from there, the illnesses and autoimmune diseases just kept coming. I didn't understand the dire connection between the emotional pain of my loss and my body completely breaking down. But today, I now know, and I'm going to be sharing with you why, when we heal from the emotional pain of grief, we can finally heal our autoimmune diseases and our chronic illnesses. And so here at A New Life Center, we have a revolutionary grieving program that we'll be publishing soon. It's a 12-week program, and it permanently heals the emotional pain of grief. I know because I've been through this program. And in doing research of what else is out there right now in the grief and loss field, we came across a book titled, "It's Okay That You're Not Okay: Meeting Grief and Loss in a Culture That Doesn't Understand," by psychotherapist Megan Devine, who herself was inspired to write the book in 2017 after losing her partner to drowning. It is the top-selling grief book, and it's said to have started a revolution in the grieving field. Now, the message of "it's okay that you're not okay," it encourages us to hold on to the pain of grief versus healing and moving on. And here's just a few quotes. They say in the book that grief is not a problem to be solved. It is an experience to be carried. Grief is a mystery to be honored. And it is said that Megan Devine debunked the culturally prescribed goal of returning to a normal, happy life, replacing it with a far healthier middle path, one that invites us to build a life alongside grief rather than to overcome it. This deceptive message of grief and the encouragement to hold on to our grief, to let it be everlasting, is a dangerous and damaging message for humankind, and actually perpetuates the creation of chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases. I know this from my own experience. I was once entrenched in this camp of nurturing and holding on to grief. As I shared, I lost my dad when I was 15, and I let the overwhelming emotional pain of his loss destroy my life and seep into every single part of it. I let it become a constant pain that I lived with. As a result of this loss, I became a psychotherapist, and I spent a year interning at a famous grief and loss center here in Denver, Colorado, that was said to be on the cutting edge of grief treatment and grief research. I can now see that, like the book I just described, they encouraged prolonged grief. They taught the idea that everyone's grief is unique and that we, as the grieving people, have permission for our grief to look the way we want and to take as long as we want. That we honor our loved ones by holding on, and that the pain of grief was the memory. This was the message to all the children and families that I worked with. And all the while, I remained stuck in the chronic pain of my grief, and through the years, continued to develop more autoimmune diseases and more chronic illnesses. Today, we are going to dismantle and examine the problematic message of it's okay that you're not okay, and the current therapeutic grief world, and how that very message, encouraging prolonged grief, is actually the greatest perpetuator of all illness and disease in humans, and how we can escape the trap of prolonged grief and finally heal. The message of it's okay that you're not okay, to carry our grief with us, to honor it and our loved ones by holding on, that the grief should stay with us, is dangerous. Ascribing to this philosophy is like playing Russian roulette with your life, and no one is telling us this. This message is giving individuals permission to identify their loss as traumatic and something that has wounded them so deeply, that the pain of their loss is so uniquely their own, and that no one can possibly understand. The culture of this grief movement is so self-centered that it doesn't allow anybody to understand their unique pain. It allows them to be in a special class of people that are disabled by their grief, and that nobody has the right to normalize it. The perspective from this book allows them to become self-righteous martyrs. It's okay that you're not okay, and the grief culture that has been spawned from this book allows individuals with grief to wear the depth of their pain as a badge of honor. They foster the unique and individualized nature of a person's grief. It allows them to place themselves in a category where nobody can understand the pain that they're going through. And if a loved one or caring person tries to console them or normalize their grief experience, it is considered cruel and unsympathetic. They become entitled, untouchable in their grief, emboldening them to isolate themselves and inflate their grief story and the chronic nature of it. The duration of their grief is self-imposed and irrefutable. Again, I know this from my own experience. That the message of it's okay that you're not okay, it actually succumbs the person to the pain of their loss and is the beginning of the dying process. A slow death, death by grief, the silent killer. The pain of unresolved grief is what kills mankind. The message to hold on to and foster grief is a message of death and dying. This model of the uniqueness, individuality, and everlasting nature of grief is based in Camp Victim. What is Camp Victim? It is the foundation of all chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases. In Camp Victim, we believe the events and circumstances of our lives have happened to us, that we are not in control of our own life experiences. Life is happening to us. In Camp Victim, the pain of grief is not in our control, and we are powerless to its effect. Chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases are born in Camp Victim. In Camp Victim, the event of grief and loss becomes a major acute emotional stressor in an individual's life because they are not in control of their experience of it. The feeling of not being in control of the event of grief heightens the emotional stress of the event. This heightened experience of emotional stress dysregulates the body's ability to be adaptive to the stressors of life and causes chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases. Also in Camp Victim, the duration of grief is self-imposed. The emotional stress of the loss is suppressed, and over time causes chronic grief depression, ultimately destroying a person's life. A slow death, death by grief, the silent killer. To better understand the dire connection between grief and loss and the creation of illness and disease is the Holmes-Ray Life Stress Inventory Scale. Developed almost 60 years ago in 1967, the Holmes-Ray is a well-established inventory with a checklist of 43 events that we know as losses, events such as the death of a spouse, divorce, or getting fired at work. These events are called the Schedule of Recent Experiences, and these 43 recent experiences, known as losses in life, were found to frequently precede the onset of severe and chronic illnesses. So strong the correlation between losses and an illness or disease occurring soon after that this inventory has been found to accurately predict a major health breakdown in the next 2 years, based on the number and severity of the recent losses an individual has had. For example, according to the Holmes-Ray scale, a middle to high number of recent losses implies a 50% chance of a major health breakdown in the next 2 years, while a high to very high number of recent losses implies an 80% chance of a major health breakdown in the next 2 years. The Holmes-Ray inventory is irrefutable evidence supporting that the emotional pain of loss creates chronic illness and disease, and within 2 years. This shows how dangerous the message to hold on to the pain of grief truly is. It creates the very illness and disease that we die from as humans. But here's the truth about grief and loss. One that paints a picture of resilience, health, vitality, and growth. This model lives in Camp Take Responsibility. Camp Take Responsibility is the belief that my life is the product of my choices and that I am in control of the responses to the events of life. The events of life, called grief and loss, are there to empower me to grow and learn and build resilience, the ability to be adaptive and bounce back to the challenges of a normal life. and can't take responsibility, grief and loss is the most common of all human experiences. Instead of individualizing the pain and experience of grief as unique and personal, and can't take responsibility, an individual sees grief and its pain as a universal human experience. Grief is normalized. And can't take responsibility, the pain of grief is resolved and healed by the perspective that I am in control of my responses to life, and I choose to grow and learn from the losses. And can't take responsibility, the pain of the loss of grief is dissolved as if it never existed. I know this to be true from my own experience. As I shared, I lost my dad when I was 15, and for the next 12 years, I lived in Camp Victim, and I let the grief destroy my life and my health. When I lived entrenched in the message of it's okay that you're not okay, of that book and that message of the therapeutic grief world, that my grief was traumatic, that it was unique to me, unsolvable, and that it was an experience to be carried throughout my lifetime like a candle. It almost killed me. Just like the Holmes Race study predicts, 6 months after my dad's death, I developed my first autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and within 2 years, I had developed ADD, severe anxiety, an eating disorder, and I tried to commit suicide twice and ended up in the hospital. Over the next 10 years, trapped in the pain of my grief, living in Camp Victim, and powerless to my grief, my body continued to break down from the chronic emotional stress of carrying my grief. I developed chronic grief depression. I also developed 7 more autoimmune diseases, such as MS, Hashimoto's, and CVID. I had to leave my career as a psychotherapist because I became so physically sick, going from doctor to doctor, doing weekly blood work, needing IVIG plasma infusions, and deeply worried that my life was ending, that my body was shutting down. I was only 28 years old. Death by grief, the silent killer. 10 years later, I have resolved the pain of my grief, and I have permanently healed all of my autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses. I am fully healthy, both physically and emotionally, and I'm on no medications, no supplements, no food diets. I see no specialists, and I do no therapeutic work. What happened? I made the choice to give up my badge of honor, my victim's story of my dad's loss and its effect, that the idea that I was somehow forever damaged and traumatized by his loss. I made the choice to live. I allowed myself to realize that loss is the most natural part of the human experience, that everybody's parents will die, and that I had a choice. And whether I used the experience of my dad dying to learn and grow within myself, or if I used the experience of him dying as my excuse to destroy my life and continue my health breakdown. I chose to move from Camp Victim to Camp Take Responsibility and start living my life again. And from this, a miracle happened. The chronic and deep pain of my grief began to quickly dissolve in my heart and fade away. I suddenly began to remember all the good memories with my dad. How much I love and appreciate him. And all the gifts my dad, Greg Warren, taught me. How he helped me become who I am, and that I could finally feel him and his love again, and I could feel myself again. And I began to live with gratitude for my dad, and that I could see his loss as a natural part of life and a necessary part of learning, one that I needed to experience. Now I'm feeling just the immense love and care that I have for my dad now that I could only experience resolving the emotional pain of his loss. And in Camp Take Responsibility, my grief healed. And as my grief began to heal, so too did all of my chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases. Within 6 months of healing the pain of my grief from losing my dad, all of my autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses permanently healed. I am here today on the other side to inspire those with grief. You can heal, that the pain of grief can resolve, and that we have a choice, that our grief does not need to be everlasting. I'm also here to expose the darkness and grave danger of the therapeutic grief message, to hold on to our grief and live with it. That this is the very message that causes the inevitable breakdown of our health into autoimmune diseases, chronic illnesses, and eventual death. To see through this deceptive message that grief is an experience to be carried, taken from the book, It's Okay That You're Not Okay, and instead to understand that this very message is killing us, and that we have a choice to take back our power, to heal our grief, and to live as healthy and well-adjusted individuals in Camp Take Responsibility. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are out there and you are like I was, and you know that you have carried the pain of your grief and you haven't found a way to resolve it, please know that we have a way. This is what I did. Where I work, a New Life Center has an online self-guided 12-week educational program, and it's called the Healthy Grieving Resolution Program. In this program, it teaches you step by step how to move from camp victim to camp take responsibility, and in that process, heal the emotional pain of your grief so you can be left with the warm and loving memories of your special person, just like I have been with my dad, and let that live in your heart. And if you're out there and you have an autoimmune disease or a chronic illness, please know we also have a 13-week online educational program, both self-guided, for those, called the Autoimmune Healing Program and the Chronic Illness Healing Program. Those programs as well move an individual from camp victim to camp take responsibility, and in that process moves their body out of chronically activated fight or flight, where the body permanently heals chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases. And if you feel that you could be a fit or interested and curious about either of these programs, our grieving program, our chronic illness program, or our autoimmune disease program, then down below in the description, I have a link to apply for a complimentary course consultation with me. I would love to meet you, to inspire you, to let you know that you do not have to live with the pain of your grief, and you also don't have to live with chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases, and that we as humans have the inherent capacity to fully and permanently heal ourselves. Thank you so much for joining me for this important video, Death by Grief, the Silent Killer. Oh, hey, I just want to come over to my chat. Neil, amen to you as well. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Take care, everyone.